One of the best things about a lot of expensive manufacturers is how much their cars depreciate. And today I'm going to talk to you about 5 in particular that come from insanely expensive manufacturers but are all pretty cheap nowadays. All 5 of these cars are less than 15 grand used nowadays, and they all come from expensive manufacturers. Hit the like button for seeing more videos like this, subscribe as well if you're new. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. We're kicking this video off with arguably the manufacturer known for the most consistently expensive cars, Rolls-Royce. Now it's worth noting that the Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit Mark II arrived before the brand had even been sold to VW, before going to BMW, but even then it was of course a luxury car manufacturer, despite having almost gone under in the early 1970s and bailed out or nationalised by the British government. The Silver Spirit wasn't built by the British government, by the way. The motor side of the business was sold off by the government in order to enable the engine business to focus on making jet engines, which are of course more important for military applications. What's crazy is that at the time of the Silver Spirit Mark II hitting the market in 1988, it was shown in an 87 marketing study that the Rolls-Royce brand was the most well-known brand in the world, except for Coca-Cola. That means it theoretically had more brand presence all in than even Ferrari. So with this in mind, the fact you can get a Silver Spirit starting anywhere from around £7,000 today is pretty crazy, and for our 15k limit you'll be looking at a 1990 model with around 100k on the clock. For that kind of money you'll be getting yourself a 6.8 litre V8 engine which puts out 226 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in a sedate time of 10.1 seconds, and I always find it amazing that such a huge engine can put out such low amounts of power. But of course power and performance weren't the focus of the Silver Spirit. It was the predecessor to the Silver Seraph, which was in turn the predecessor to the Phantom and Ghost, so this really is a proper full-size luxury car built for a chauffeur to waft someone famous or important around in. It had some amazing features like automatic ride control which could adjust the suspension in real time, insane for a car of its age. Add on the super luxurious interior and you've got a proper luxury time capsule. These are classic cars now though, and parts are typically pretty expensive, so though yes it's super cheap to buy, it might not be quite as cheap to run. From one luxury brand to another now, and a brand that has historically been one of Rolls-Royce's most fierce competitors, Bentley. But what's funny is that at the time of the Bentley Arnage hitting the market, both brands were owned by the same company, Vickers, who were also responsible for the Rolls I just mentioned. That's why the Arnage also came with a Rolls-Royce equivalent, which I mentioned in a recent video on cheap luxury cars. You should go check out that one after you've finished this video to compare the two cars, but genuinely outside of the body, badges and some of the interior specs, they're pretty similar offerings. This is obviously a way by Vickers to take two cars to market while basically only doing the R&D for one, and to benefit from the growing sales of both brands. Hence there were other ways to save money with this Arnage, as it did have a 4.4 litre twin turbo V8 engine option which came from BMWs, and they had originally considered engines from both Mercedes and General Motors. The one I want to mention in this video however is a Rolls-Royce Bentley block, a 6.8 litre twin turbocharged V8 example to be exact, which puts out 400 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.8 seconds, which is pretty decent for a full-size luxury car, almost half the time of that old Rolls. Of course Vickers were on their way out, with BMW and VW fighting over ownership of the Bentley and Rolls-Royce brands, hence the brand rapidly moved to get that 6.8 litre Bentley block into the car, which was adapted from the Mulsanne engine to be able to fit into the car. As VW now had the Bentley brand, they didn't want to run a BMW engine and be in dealing with one of their main German competitors. But the car is great looking outside and in my opinion. It's basically the oldest Bentley you can buy without it looking super classic and old. To get into one of these you'll need to spend around £10,000 at the bottom end, and 15k is enough to get you a 2002 model with 50k on the clock. The rear exhaust clamp is the most well-known area that causes issues, and owners typically use stronger aftermarket replacements. Camshaft failures are also known, as well as suspension issues. We're going from luxury cars that you typically want to be driven around in to a luxury car that you'd probably want to drive instead now, the Aston Martin DB7. Aston has such a star-studded history, building honestly some of the most beautiful, most sought-after, most perfect cars of all time. I mean, think of the DB5, the DB4 GT Zagato, and more recent Aston Martin Vanquish, all absolutely magnificent looking cars that felt like the brand was really giving you something special. I'm not quite sure this can be said for the DB7, but that's okay, it's still an Aston Martin. Or is it? Well, yes, but no. It was not a full Aston Martin project, but it kind of was at the same time. It started as a Jaguar project and was built mostly using Jaguar parts and was funded by Ford, who owned Jaguar at the time. Jaguar had been working on a car that was supposed to be called the F-Type, and when Ford bought both Jaguar and Aston, they cancelled the project because it was going to be too expensive. This all came as a result of some tough economic conditions in the early 1990s, so building expensive new Jaguars or Aston Martins just wasn't going to fly with shareholders. But once the execs realised they could create a car by using many existing parts, they resurrected the project and got Callum to redesign the car to look like an Aston Martin, plus they raided the Ford parts bin to get it built. The XJS platform was taken and modified, the rear lights from the Mazda 323F were used, the door handles are the same as those in the Mark I Mazda MX-5, same with the stalks behind the wheel, and some Ford Scorpio and Citroen CX parts were used too. This meant the car cost just $30 million to build in total, which was pretty good at the time. Even the engine was a Jaguar 3.2 litre supercharged inline 6 block, producing 335 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.5 seconds, and it remains the most expensive car on the list, starting at our 15k limit, which will get you a 1998 model with 100k on the clock. Main issues on these are around the exhaust manifolds cracking, water leaks, steering problems, and very expensive aircon replacements. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. Apologies for the scruff today. I've just got back from Zimbabwe on safari. I didn't have access to my razor, so I am looking trash. I'm literally doing this on Red Eye. Red Eye, work today, and now making a YouTube video. Porsche are of course a luxury high-performance sports car company, and prices have only really gotten more and more aggressive over the last 30 years. I mean, the 718 Cayman non-S literally starts at around 52k with no options nowadays, and that's for the poor man's 911. Luckily, you can still get a poor man's 911 from its original generation well within our price range, the 987 Cayman S to be exact, which starts at around £8,000, and £15,000 you'll be easily getting one from around 2008 with 60,000 miles on the clock. When you compare that to cars like the TTRS, that's pretty decent money for a pretty capable car that still has those beloved Porsche handling dynamics. Of course, the box that came before it with the 986 generation as a two-seater premium roadster to offer something better than the BMW Z3, Mercedes SLK, and all the other slightly more premium competitors, but as a cheaper entry point into Porsche ownership. The Boxster wasn't the first baby Porsche though, you can't forget cars like the 944, 928 and all the rest. But somehow it feels like with the 987 generation, the Cayman might have actually been the first baby Porsche to gain any real respect in the market by proper Porsche enthusiasts. And in S-Spec it comes with a decent engine block too, a 3.4 litre flat 6, which puts out 290 brake horsepower in the pre-2009 examples, which takes to 60 in 5.2 seconds, not bad at all for a relatively small, naturally aspirated engine. Part of the reason why it got that respect was because it was genuinely a performance car. This car, with legend Walter Rule at the helm, lapped the ring in 8 minutes 11 seconds, 4 seconds faster than the official time for the 911-997 Carrera set by Porsche, though of course the driver mod was an important part of that. It was for this reason that the Cayman was used by third-party race teams, particularly for the Nürburgring endurance races, including one that finished 4th overall in the 2007 24 Hours of the Ring of 220 cars. That's not bad at all. The 2.7 litre block in the non-S as well as the 987.2S are known to be more reliable, with the bore scoring and IMS failures being more relevant to 987.1S. Taking the top spot on this list, we're heading back to the luxury car class, though it's kind of a hybrid between the last two cars and the first two cars, given it actually sits in the large performance luxury car class. It's a 5th generation Maserati Quattroporte. And while yes, Maserati is a pretty expensive premium brand, it's also known to be one of the ones that suffers the most from dreaded depreciation. That's why this car starts around the £9,500 mark, with our 15k limit being enough for a 2007 example with 40,000 miles on the clock, which is pretty decent considering what I'm about to show you. Back in the earlier days of the brands, Maserati and Ferrari were effectively arch rivals, racing for the Mille Miglia, Grand Prix wins and all the rest, while trying to shift sports cars, particularly in the Italian market. But then in 1997, Ferrari bought a 50% share in the brand as it was struggling under Fiat's ownership. Then 2 years later, Ferrari took full control of Maserati and turned it into its own luxury division, which must have felt pretty good for any Ferrari employees that had been at the firm since the 50s and 60s. The reason why I'm telling you this is that Ferrari therefore were super important for the development of the Mark V Quattroporte, hence it is Pininfarina designed by the incredibly talented Ken Okuyama, who also designed the Enzo Ferrari as an example, and it has a Ferrari engine in it too, also used in different guises than the F430, California and even the 458. That's a 4.2 litre V8 block which puts out 394 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5 seconds, pretty decent for both its age and performance. I mean, it's quicker than the two sports cars on this list. The interior is premium and luxurious with a really decent number of specs for the age of the car, though there have been some questions around build quality. There have also been questions around the electrics, clutches and troublesome rattles and squeaks. And so there you have it, 5 cars from expensive manufacturers which all now cost less than £15,000. Thanks to both you guys and the patrons for watching, but now you should go and check out these insanely cool exotic cars by clicking on screen.